1977. Disco was splitting America down the middle. Punk was screaming from the underground, and somehow Sean Cassidy was a heartthrob. The songs that topped the charts that year tell a story of a country in transition, caught between the optimism of the 60s and the cynicism that was coming. Let's examine what actually made it to number one. You Don't Have to Be a Star by Marilyn, Maku, and Billy Davis Jr., who didn't just stumble into success. They calculated their way out of the fifth dimension when they realized the group's best days were behind them. While the fifth dimension was busy trying to recapture their up and away glory days, this married couple was quietly planning their exit strategy. They formed their duo in 1975, but here's what most people don't know. Their departure from the fifth dimension wasn't amicable. There were bitter contract disputes, and the remaining members felt betrayed when Maku and Davis took some of the group's signature vocal arrangements with them to their solo career. The song itself was written by James Dean, no relation to the actor, who was a struggling songwriter living in a one-bedroom apartment in Hollywood. He composed it on a broken piano missing 3 keys, which is why the melody has those distinctive gaps. Dean sold the song for $500 because he couldn't make rent, and when it hit number one, he was working as a night janitor at Capitol Records, cleaning the very studios where his song was being celebrated by executives who had no idea who he was. Stevie Wonder wrote I Wish about his childhood in Detroit, but what he rarely discusses is how brutal those early years actually were. Born 6 weeks premature in 1950, he was placed in an incubator that received too much oxygen, causing his blindness, a medical mistake that his family couldn't afford to sue over. By age 8, he was already performing on street corners, not out of passion, but out of financial necessity. His mother, Lula Mae Hardaway, worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, and young Stevie Morris, as he was known then, contributed whatever coins he could gather from his harmonica performances. The talk box effect that makes I Wish so distinctive wasn't planned. It happened by accident during a late-night recording session when Wonder's keyboard malfunctioned. The sound was so garbled that the engineers wanted to scrap the take, but Wonder insisted they keep it, saying it sounded like what memory feels like when you're trying to grab it. The song spent a week at number one, but Wonder never performed it live during his peak years because he said it made him too sad, reminding him of friends from his neighborhood who didn't make it out. Royce wasn't even supposed to exist as a band. They were originally called Magic Wand, a backing group for Edwin Starr. But when Starr's career stalled, producer Norman Whitfield essentially kidnapped the entire band, changed their name, and locked them in the studio until they came up with the material for the Car Wash soundtrack. Whitfield was notorious for his controlling methods. He would literally lock musicians in studios for days, feeding them nothing but coffee and sandwiches until they produced what he wanted. The band members later sued him for unpaid royalties, claiming he had stolen their publishing rights while they were too exhausted and intimidated to read the contracts properly. The Car Wash recording session lasted 18 hours straight, and by the end, lead singer Gwen Dickey had lost her voice completely. The famous "work and work" chant you hear? That's actually the backup singers mocking the studio engineer who kept making them do take after take. The song that launched them to fame also nearly broke them up. The band was so burned out from Whitfield's methods that 3 members quit immediately after the song topped the charts, missing out on what would be their biggest paydays. Before we continue, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your 1977 story. And if this brings back memories, hit that like button and subscribe. We're just getting started with this musical time machine. Share this with someone who lived through these times, because trust me, they'll have stories to tell. Mary MacGregor was a folk singer working in coffee houses in Minnesota when she got dragged into the pop world against her better judgment. The song was written by Phil Cody and Peter Yarrow. Yes, the same Peter Yarrow from Peter, Paul, and Mary, who is trying to rebuild his career after serving time for a child molestation conviction in 1970. The music industry quietly welcomed him back, and Torn Between Two Lovers was his comeback vehicle.
Torn between two lovers.
Though his name was deliberately kept off most promotional materials. MacGregor later said she felt manipulated into recording a song that went against her personal values, as she was deeply religious and uncomfortable with the song's theme of adultery. MacGregor made almost nothing from the song's success because she had signed away her publishing rights for a flat fee of $1,000, thinking it would never amount to anything. The most bizarre aspect of her brief fame was that she became the unofficial spokesperson for extramarital affairs. She received thousands of letters from women asking for advice about their own relationship dilemmas. She hated every minute of it and returned to folk music in Minnesota, refusing most interview requests about the song that made her famous. To this day, she won't perform it at her rare live shows. Bruce Springsteen wrote Blinded by the Light in 1973.
Blinded by light.
But his original version was buried as the opening track on Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey, and practically no one heard it. Manfred Mann discovered it by accident. He was looking for Springsteen songs to cover after hearing good things about this unknown New Jersey kid, and he chose the most obscure track on the album. What's controversial is that Mann completely rewrote the lyrics in several places, changing Springsteen's Cut Loose Like a Deuce to the famous Revved Up Like a Deuce, and Springsteen wasn't consulted about the changes. The boss was reportedly furious, but couldn't do anything about it contractually. The synthesizer solo that defines the song was played on a Moog that belonged to Chris Thompson, the session singer hired just for the day. Thompson was paid £50 for the session and watched in amazement as the song he helped create spent weeks at number one. The strangest part, Manfred Mann himself barely plays on the recording. He was dealing with severe depression at the time and left most of the musical decisions to his bandmates. When the song hit number one, he was in therapy and didn't even celebrate, calling it just another song by someone else. Rick Dees was a radio DJ in Memphis who created Disco Duck
I'm the disco duck.
as a joke during his morning show, never intending it to be a real record. The song started as a 5-minute comedy bit where Dees would imitate Donald Duck singing disco songs, mocking the disco craze that was dividing the country. What's infuriating to serious musicians is that Dees recorded the entire thing in one afternoon for less than $500, while countless talented artists were struggling to get record deals. The cast of idiots weren't even real musicians. They were mostly other radio DJs and a few session players who thought they were just goofing around. The song's success was so unexpected that Dees didn't even have a record contract when it started climbing the charts. Small radio stations began playing a bootleg recording off the air, and record executives were scrambling to sign a novelty act they couldn't even find. The most absurd part of the whole phenomenon was that Dees performed the song on American Bandstand, wearing a duck costume, and Dick Clark had to introduce him with a straight face. Years later, Dees admitted he was embarrassed by the song's success and that it overshadowed everything else he ever did in radio and music. We're halfway there, and we've covered some serious ground, from stolen songs to accidental hits. What's your take on these stories? Did any of these revelations surprise you? Well, tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like this video if you're enjoying these untold stories. And make sure you've subscribed because we've got more surprises coming up. Share this with your friends. They probably think they know these songs, but they don't know the half of it. Chicago was in complete creative chaos when If You Leave Me Now was recorded. The band had just lost their producer James William Garrico in a nasty legal battle, and they were being pressured by Columbia Records to go in a softer direction, something that absolutely disgusted their jazz rock purists like Terry Kath. Peter Cetera wrote the song as a deliberate middle finger to his bandmates who wanted to stay experimental, crafting something so commercial and sappy that he thought they'd reject it outright. Instead, the record label loved it, creating a permanent rift in the band between the rockers and the balladeers, that never truly healed. The fatal irony of the song's success was that it marked the beginning of the end for Chicago's credibility as innovative musicians. Terry Kath, their brilliant guitarist who Jimi Hendrix called better than him, became increasingly frustrated with the band's commercial direction and began drinking heavily. Just months after If You Leave Me Now topped the charts, Kath accidentally killed himself while cleaning a gun he thought was unloaded. Many in the band blamed the pressure to create more commercial hits like this ballad for pushing Kath over the edge. The song that made them the most money also cost them their soul. Steve Miller had been grinding it out since 1966, but by 1976, he was nearly broke and about to be dropped by Capitol Records. Rockin' Me was written in desperation.
So keep on rocking me, baby.
Miller literally threw together every rock and roll cliche he could think of, sampling bits of Rocket 88 and other classic riffs, because he figured if he was going down, he might as well steal from the best. What's controversial is that he never properly credited or paid royalties to the original writers of the riffs he borrowed, leading to several lawsuits that quietly settled out of court years later. The most ridiculous aspect of Miller's sudden success was that he had been trying to be taken seriously as a blues musician for a decade, but the song that finally made him rich was basically a parody of rock and roll. During recording, he told the engineers to make everything louder and dumber, joking that American radio only played the stupidest possible version of everything. When Rockin' Me hit number one, he was vindicated and bitter at the same time. He had proven his point about American musical taste, but at the cost of any artistic respect he might have earned. Rod Stewart wrote Tonight's the Night
Tonight's the night.
about his relationship with Swedish actress Britt Ekland, but the song's overtly lyrics caused massive controversy that the record label tried to suppress. Radio stations banned it, religious groups protested, and several countries refused to allow it to be released. What made it even more scandalous was that Stewart was married to someone else at the time, his wife Alana Hamilton, and everyone knew the song wasn't about her. The public nature of his affair, combined with the explicit lyrics, made Stewart a tabloid target and damaged his reputation with more conservative fans who had supported his earlier work. Stewart recorded the song in just 2 takes at a small studio in Los Angeles, and the famous guitar solo was played by Jim Cregan, who had joined Stewart's band just weeks earlier. Cregan later revealed that he was hired specifically because Stewart's previous guitarist refused to play on such an obviously song, fearing it would hurt their reputations. The backing vocals were provided by a group of session singers who insisted on being uncredited, and one of them was reportedly Ekland herself, though this has never been officially confirmed. When the song topped the charts, Stewart was simultaneously at the peak of his commercial success and the lowest point of his personal reputation. And there you have it, the songs that define 1977. Whatever your connection to these tunes, I want to hear from you in the comments below. Share your memories, your opinions, even your disagreements. Well, especially your disagreements. If you enjoyed digging into the real stories behind the music, make sure you've liked this video and hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more musical myths to bust and secrets to spill. Share this with anyone who thinks they know everything about the music they grew up with. Trust me, they don't. Until next time, keep listening. But remember, the story behind the song is usually more interesting than the song itself.